You ever see something online and just wonder, how did that start a massive fight? Well, today we're diving into exactly that, a huge digital debate that exploded all because of two tiny Filipino words. This is a story about the line between real loyalty and just, performing for an audience online.
And this is the question that lit the match. It's from a user called Netizen Mike. In the original Filipino, he asks, Tatay nyo rebulto, hindi ba pwedeng tatay natin? Which basically translates to, your father is a statue? Can it be our father? Seems like a simple question, right? But no, this one sentence set off a firestorm, and it called into question the sincerity of a popular influencer and the whole campaign they were pushing. Let's get into it.
All right, so to really get what's going on here, we have to set the scene. At the center of all this was a political signature campaign, and it brought two very, very different online personalities head-to-head. So this signature campaign was pitched as a really big deal. It was started by, quote, respected supporters and lawyers, and its whole purpose was to give a voice to everyone who backed a former president, a real grassroots kind of movement. And this is where our main characters enter the picture. On one side, you've got Netizen Mike, who starts asking some pretty tough, practical questions about the whole thing. And on the other side, you have influencer Joey Cruz, a huge supporter of the campaign who ends up right in the middle of all this scrutiny. And here's where things start to get really messy. The source material draws this really sharp contrast between the respected people who started the campaign and this influencer style. See, when Joey Cruz was getting these tough questions during live streams, the response wasn't calm or clear. It was allegedly a lot of swearing and just brushing people off. That created a major disconnect.
So all that tension, all that drama, it eventually zeroed in on something incredibly small, a single choice of words. But as we're about to see, when you're talking politics, there's really no such thing as a small word.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't speak Filipino, this is the absolute key to understanding this whole thing. The word nyo means your, but it's exclusive. It separates the speaker from the group. It's like saying, that's your thing. But natin means our, and it's inclusive. It means we're all in this together. A tiny difference, I know, but it has a huge impact. So the argument here is that when you say Tatay natin, our father, you're part of the team, you're in the circle. But when you say Tatay nyo, your father, which the influencer supposedly did, you're suddenly on the outside pointing in. It's like one word builds a bridge and the other one builds a wall.
And that was Netizen Mike's whole point. He argued that using yo wasn't just some random slip-up, it felt like a deliberate choice to create distance, to alienate the very community the influencer was supposed to be a part of, for a movement that's all about unity that felt like a huge betrayal.
And this is where the accusation gets really serious. The argument being made was that this wasn't just a grammar mistake, it was a tell, a kind of Freudian slip that revealed, quote, shallow sincerity and pretended support. The implication was pretty clear. If you really truly felt like you were one of them, you would have naturally said natin. Using nyo just felt like you were playing a part.
But, it didn't stop with just that one word. That little critique was really just the tip of the iceberg. It kinda opened the floodgates to much bigger questions about the entire campaign, about how transparent it really was.
As you can imagine, Netizen Mike got a lot of heat for this. But he defended himself, basically saying, look, I'm not dumb, I'm not trying to cause trouble, I am just asking the right questions. He felt he was just doing his due diligence on how this whole thing was being run.
And here's one of the first big practical questions that came up. It's a totally fair point. What if I don't want to give my ID number? If you need an ID for a signature to count, what about people who are worried about their privacy? It's a real concern.
And the questions just kept coming from there. People wanted to know, okay, what kind of ID are we talking about here? And maybe the most controversial one, why on earth are minors who can't even vote being asked to join a political signature campaign? Suddenly, the debate shifted from language to straight-up legitimacy.
But you know what the real problem was, according to the source? It wasn't just the questions themselves. It was the silence. Or, even worse, the alleged hostility that met these perfectly reasonable questions. That just poured gasoline on the fire and made everything seem way less transparent.
Okay, so let's zoom out. Why are we even talking about this? Why does one little online spat matter? Well, because it's actually a perfect snapshot of how we test, trust, and authenticity in our totally digital world.
I think this whole thing teaches us a few big lessons. First, online, every single word you use is under a microscope,
and it can become a test of your loyalty. Second, a simple argument about words can pull a thread that unravels much bigger issues, like trust. And finally, these online fights almost never stay on topic, do they? They spiral out and become about someone's entire character.
And that really leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? In a world where so much of what we do is curated for an audience, from our political beliefs to our personal lives, how do you ever really know what's real? What's the difference between someone who's a true believer and someone who's just putting on a really good show? It's something this whole debate really forces us to think about.